Ever look at the headlines, especially the big geopolitical ones, and just feel there's way more going on underneath?
Oh, absolutely. There's always hidden complexity, isn't there?
Exactly. And today we're going deep on one of those nations, Iran. It's constantly in the news, from nuclear talks to internal struggles.
It really is. A country facing huge pressures, both from within and outside. And the details often get missed.
That's why we've pulled together a really wide range of sources for this deep dive. We're looking at everything from Reddit discussions, trying to get that ground level feel,
Right, that unfiltered perspective.
Yeah, alongside reports from places like Florida International University, the Bertelsmann Transformation Index, Carnegie Endowment, Council on Foreign Relations.
Serious institutions. And major news outlets, too, like Fox News, Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic. So a real mix of viewpoints.
Our goal today really is to cut through the noise. We want to pull out the key insights and give you a truly informed view on what's shaping Iran's future, the internal challenges, the external impacts.
And things are moving fast. Some of this information is incredibly current, like dated today, June 21st, 2025.
It's happening right now. So let's unpack it. Where do we even start with understanding Iran today?
Well, you have to start with the regime itself, the core structure. Our sources call it a theocratic rule, but it sits alongside a kind of semi-republican setup.
Theocratic, but with Republican elements. How does that work?
At the very top, you have the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. And he has just extraordinary tools of power, as the sources put it, influence over all branches of government.
All branches. So his power is pretty much absolute.
Effectively, yes. It is far beyond any other person or institution there.
And playing a huge role in maintaining that power, I gather, is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC.
Oh, absolutely central. Described as one of the most powerful and feared organizations in Iran. And crucially, they report directly to Khamenei. Nobody else.
Directly to the top. And their role isn't just military, is it?
Not at all. That's key. Their influence is pervasive. It stretches deep into domestic politics, the economy.
The economy? How so?
Well, sources talk about them running illicit commercial and financial networks, even whole economic empires. Think oil smuggling, major industries.
Wow. So they're a state within a state, almost.
In many ways, yes. And you see it reflected in politics, too. Lots of top political jobs are held by former IRGC commanders. It cements their power everywhere.
And this structure, this concentration of power, allows the regime to maintain what the sources call a strong monopoly on violence.
Exactly. It's not just the formal military or police. They also use these regime-approved vigilante groups.
Vigilantes to do what?
To crack down on protests, basically.
Yeah.
Quell dissent, often brutally.
And the repression goes beyond that, right? We hear about forced confessions.
Yes, through torture, according to reports. Widespread press censorship, Iran ranks near the very bottom globally for press freedom.
Third worst, I think I saw.
That's right. And then there's the execution rate, second only to China, globally. It's a system built on control and, frankly, fear.
It paints a really grim picture. It reminds me of that Reddit comment we saw, someone saying Iran is like a nation held hostage by its own regime.
But haunted by the fate of its neighbors.
Yeah.
That was powerful.
Stuck in a house we hate, surrounded by fires we fear more. It just captures that dilemma so perfectly, doesn't it?
It really does. That internal conflict, hating the current situation, but terrified of the chaos seen elsewhere, that fear definitely helps the regime stay put.
And that feeling of being trapped must be magnified by the economy. The sources describe it as just dire.
Dire is putting it mildly. The system is called monopolistic religious commercial. Basically, it favors regime loyalists. Massively.
So it's not designed for the average person's benefit?
Not primarily, no. It's about rewarding loyalty, consolidating the regime's economic power, not broad prosperity.
The numbers we saw are just staggering. The currency, the rial.
Plummeting, record lows. It passed 100,000 tomans to the dollar.
And a toman is 10,000 rials, right? So that's 1,000,000 rials to the dollar.
Effectively, yes. It's almost hard to comprehend. And that fuels inflation officially. Over 50%.
Officially. Some say the real rate is double that.
Easily could be. Then you have the stock market in free fall. People are pulling their capital out.
Where's the money going?
Into currency, gold, offshore investments.
Yeah.
Anywhere but productive parts of the Iranian economy, it seems. A mass exodus of private capital.
And this leads to deindustrialization. Factories closing.
Exactly. Sources talk about a path toward deindustrialization. It's not just sanctions. It's economic mismanagement and restrictive policies from within.
And the human cost. Unemployment must be huge.
Especially among young people, women, university graduates. The very people who've been leading the recent protests. They have skills, education, but no opportunities.
Which brings us to the social side. That economic despair mixed with repression. It exploded with the woman life freedom movement, didn't it?
It really did. Starting September 2022, our sources call it the most significant wave of protests demanding regime change in years, maybe decades.
What was different about it?
Its breadth. It cut across social classes, and it showed this irreversible divide, as one source put it, between the state and the society.
And a shift in blame. People aren't just blaming America or Israel anymore.
That's a crucial point. The focus now is overwhelmingly on domestic governance. People see the regime itself as the source of their problems.
It's a massive shift.
It is. And another tragic outcome of all this is the brain drain.
Ah, yes. The numbers there were shocking, too. How many people are leaving?
Estimates are between 150,000 and 180,000 highly educated young Iranians every year.
Every year. The cost must be enormous.
Over $150 billion annually in terms of lost potential, lost innovation. And interestingly, they're not just leaving for money.
What's the main driver, then?
Sources say it's primarily for social and intellectual gain. They want opportunities, political freedom, social freedom, things they just can't get at home. They're voting with their seat.
So, inside Iran, an iron grip, economic meltdown, massive social unrest, people fleeing. How does this internal pressure cooker affect Iran's actions outside its borders? Let's talk strategy, nuclear ambitions.
Right, the external dimension. Sources lay out Iran's grand strategy pretty bluntly. It's aimed at getting the U.S. out of the region,
evicting the U.S.,
replacing Israel with Palestine, and ultimately dismantling the whole U.S.-led global order. It's a huge ambition.
And the nuclear program is key to that.
It seems to be. Tehran uses what's called a dual overt and covert nuclear strategy.
Okay, break that down. Overt and covert.
Overtly, they accumulate fissile material, enrich uranium, build up stockpiles, and use that as leverage. Covertly, they focus on the tricky parts. Weaponization, fitting a potential bomb onto missiles.
The actual bomb-making bits.
Exactly. And crucially, accelerating concealment maneuvers to hide things from the IAEA, the international inspectors, keep them guessing.
But there was that interesting point about Khamenei himself. He actually prefers latency over having the bomb.
Yes, that's a fascinating detail. He prioritizes latency over weaponization.
Meaning he wants the ability to build one quickly, but maybe not the actual weapon right now. Why?
The thinking seems to be that crossing the threshold might actually reduce Iran's leverage. The ambiguity is useful. Plus, there's a fear it would give too much power to the IRGC.
The internal power dynamics again. He doesn't want the guards getting too strong.
Potentially, yes. Latency keeps him in ultimate control, gives him deterrence, but avoids fully empowering the IRGC with the ultimate weapon. It's a complex balancing act.
Meanwhile, Israel sees this very differently. For them, a nuclear Iran is
an existential threat. Unacceptable. They have this doctrine of kinetic prevention. They've acted on it before, striking Iraq's program in '81, Syria's in '07.
And the October 7th attack made them even more worried.
Absolutely. It heightened concerns about monitoring Iran while dealing with immediate threats. And we've seen recent actions, Israeli strikes in June 2025, hitting top IRGC officials.
Which Iran called a declaration of war. Things are really heating up.
They are. And you have other players involved. Russia is seen as a convenient partner for Iran, helping sow instability, maybe providing advanced weapons or tech.
Like air defense. Or even nuclear propulsion for ships.
Those are possibilities mentioned. It serves Russia's goals of challenging the West.
And China. Where do they stand?
China values stability, mainly for its economic interests, like the Belt and Road. They're unlikely to lead the charge against Iran's program unless it really threatens key partners like South Korea or Japan. Their approach is more pragmatic.
Looking ahead then, what are the big potential turning points? The succession issue seems huge.
Definitely. Khamenei's succession is flagged as a major factor. What happens after he's gone?
What do the experts predict?
There's speculation Iran could become more of an overt military dictatorship, with power consolidating even further within the IRGC.
And the IRGC would want to cross the nuclear threshold.
That's the concern. They might be less cautious than Khamenei has been. It's a massive wild card.
Which leads to that really difficult question. What about external intervention? Regime change from the outside?
The sources are extremely wary of that. Strong warnings about unintended consequences.
Like what? What are the fears?
Turning Iran into a turbocharged version of Syria. Civil war, ethnic fragmentation, balkanization of Baluchistan, Kurdistan, and a massive refugee crisis heading towards Europe.
Just chaos, basically.
Pretty much. And the lessons from Iraq and Libya loom large.
Right. Regime change there didn't exactly go smoothly.
Not at all. Sources say it generally doesn't end well. It took Iraq almost 20 years just to start stabilizing after Saddam. And you risk creating vacuums for groups like ISIS.
Or just distracting the U.S. and NATO from other global hotspots like Ukraine or Taiwan.
Precisely. So the consensus from these diverse sources is pretty clear on this point.
Which is?
Regime change must come from within, not by outer force. The focus should be on supporting internal dynamics, playing the long game.
Supporting groups inside Iran that want change.
Yes, those who share democratic values. But it requires patience, nuance, not direct military action.
What about figures like the exiled crown prince, Reza Pahlavi? Is he seen as a viable alternative?
He's mentioned, he talks about a 100-day transition plan. Some see potential there, but his actual support inside Iran, especially within the military, is unclear. And any perceived closeness to Israel, for example, would be deeply unpopular domestically. It's tricky.
Very tricky. And there's one more factor, demographics. Iran's population is changing.
Yes, there's this demographic window of opportunity right now with a large working-age population. That's roughly until 2040, 2045.
But after that?
As the population ages, it's likely to become more risk-averse, less inclined towards risky, violent confrontations with the regime.
So change might happen more slowly than some might hope, dictated by internal rhythms.
That's the implication. Demographic shifts could temper the pace of political change.
Wow. So pulling all this together, Iran is clearly on a really precarious path. You've got this regime, unpopular, overseeing economic ruin, but it's resilient, dug in.
Exactly. And balanced against that are the huge risks of external intervention or just outright internal collapse.
And the people themselves, as the sources show, are deeply unhappy, but also deeply afraid of chaos, remembering what happened to their neighbors.
That tension is key. The yearning for change versus the fear of the unknown, the fear of becoming another Syria or Iraq. Iran's future seems caught right in that balance.
So it really makes you think, doesn't it? What is the role for outside powers when a nation is caught in such a bind?
How do you support liberty without triggering even greater suffering or destabilization?
There are no easy answers there. It highlights the complexity, the need to understand these deep internal currents, not just the surface-level geopolitics. Hopefully this deep dive has helped shed some light on those layers for you.